Are there any further nominations for vice chair? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
And that is 6-4. One abstain?
Abstain.
One abstain. Thank you. By way of introductions for the community here present today and those watching us on CAT TV. On my left, a new member, Tom Jacobs. Vote getter on the last election. Welcome, Tom. We're glad to have you. And on the other end, just so we continue the youth movement here in the town of Bennington, we have, not you, Stuart, you're too great. We have John McFadden, so welcome, John. I'm glad to have you here.
Thank you.
All right, next order of business, the minutes from March 25th.
I'll move they be accepted as printed.
Second that.
Okay, any discussion on the minutes? Motion and a second.
Very well done.
Not all in favor? Is unanimous?
I'll abstain.
One abstain, 6-4, one abstain. Okay. All right, put that aside. Next item is the warrants. Tom, I'm going to start with you at your side. You see anything on the warrants you want to discuss?
Actually, I would defer if Stu has anything that we should be considering as extraordinary that the board should have already called your attention to.
There's nothing extraordinary here.
Having heard that, I have no questions.
Okay. Greg?
Three things, Stu. Page 1, about 3/4 of the way down, the Anderson Equipment Company. The backhoe repairs, about $10,000 in backhoe repairs.
Yes.
Anything particular we should know about that? Is that going to affect LIFO or?
No, I don't think so. I couldn't tell you specifically what it was, but it is the water department backhoe, and pretty standard. These repairs tend to run pretty high.
Okay. Just 3 lines down from that, Bear Construction family room renovations. Where is that? Which family room is that?
Well, the family room is actually constructed at the recreation center in what used to be a storage area just off the back hallway.
Okay.
We found a need for a room where parents could take their young children who might not be of the appropriate sex for the men's and ladies' locker rooms, as well as where people could take disabled individuals to assist them with getting ready for the pool. So we've constructed this. We're using the Sleeman Fund monies to do it. So it's a fund that was set aside in honor of the Sleeman family, and this is really an ADA accessible changing room now.
Gotcha. So that's a new item as opposed to a
Yes.
renovation on an existing item?
Correct.
Thank you. And then on page 8, URS Corporation, Coacher Drive Streetscape. Just elaborate a little bit on that.
Well, the Coker Drive Streetscape it's a project that is being funded through Agency of Transportation funds. The BCRC is working as the general contractor.
That's the pedestrian study?
Yes, thank you very much. That shortened my answer dramatically.
All right. That's good enough for me.
Is that it, Greg?
That's all I got. Thank you.
John, do you have anything?
No, I do not.
Okay, Justin?
I do. Page 5, Stuart. I see these are shooting targets, but I see something zombie target. Just curious as to what that was.
I missed that. Where are you?
We're on page 5, well, almost at the bottom of the page.
Third to last line, yeah.
I can only tell you that those are targets that are being purchased for target practice by the police department. I don't know whether that's a brand name or a particular look.
Just caught my eye.
Every eventuality.
Anything else, Justin?
No, that was the only question I had.
Jim?
No, sir.
Sharon?
Nope.
Okay, set aside the warrants. Next item on the agenda will be citizens. Do we have any citizens out there that want to speak to select board and town people on an issue that's not on tonight's agenda? Seeing none, then we'll move on to the rail study progress report. And we have Michael Keane and Wendy Wood. Who's going to do the speaking? Wendy? Okay, we come up to the mic so everybody can hear you.
Copy of the brief report for everybody on select board.
Okay, this one we have already, right? Yep, yes.
This one, yeah.
Right.
Anybody not have one?
Yeah, our cameraman's not going to focus on the lovely lady, he's going to focus on the chart so the people at home can see him.
Put that over there in case somebody else wants to. Okay.
Do I have a copy? Oh, there it is, right there. Okay, yeah, we're ready.
We're ready. All right. Well, first, I'd just like to say thank you for having me back here again, and my team with the Southwestern Vermont Rail Corridor Committee, it's a mouthful, SVRCC. And we are here this evening to give you an update on the Bi-State Rail Study, which was formerly known as the Track Race Study. And they decided that this sounded a little bit better because it doesn't want to be just two states. We're also here because we would like to ask for your continued support on the project, which we did receive wholeheartedly last year. And we would also like to request that you speak to your neighbors, the community, and through Cat TV here, and email that you live in Banner, and those who are here in the audience. We just ask you to please support this, and in doing so, we will ask you to support by writing letters to the project manager at the Vermont Agency of Transportation. His name is Pappas. And I do have that information here, which I will hand out to everyone. I believe it's on the last page of your packet. This has been a long process. It's been a 2-year study. And we started out initially with 6 different alternatives for the route in which the train would take coming in through southwestern Vermont. And also, there was another alternative, which was sadly called the no-bill alternative, which was not something that we wanted. And during this whole process, which involved a lot of public forums, a lot of meetings with the various stakeholders, we arrived at 2 particular alternatives. And those alternatives include, if you all know, or maybe you don't, I should assume that, there is a rail that comes up through New York from New York City up through Albany and continues on up the eastern portion of the state of New York and goes into Vermont, into Rutland. And that is commonly referred to as the Ethan Allen. And there is another alternative, which would be, well, 2 actually. We could reroute the Ethan Allen to through southwestern Vermont, or we would have a new bill coming into southwestern Vermont whilst keeping the existing rail that now goes up through Saratoga Springs and back into Rutland that way. I would like to let everyone know here that we have been paying for this. And when I say we, the state of Vermont has been subsidizing this. And so there, as a result of that, and as a result of some concern as to which would be the most efficient way of doing this, conversations and discussions have been, and negotiations, I should say, to be more specific, are continuing right now between the state of Vermont, Vermont Agency of Transportation, and the New York State Department of Transportation as to how they can work out that division of costs. Amtrak is also involved in that. They apparently have some pretty good methodologies that they apply to these types of situations. So ongoing as I stand here and speak. I do know that there is a time frame of wanting to complete this well before the end of the fiscal year. So documents could then be forwarded on to the Federal Railroad Administration and requests for funding would be included for that. So here we are. We have these 2 routes, and It really kind of depends upon where you're at. Obviously, people in New York State would love to keep that extra train, but the focus of this particular study is to provide rail service to those areas that are underserved or unserved. We fall into the other category. So we'll have to see what results of these negotiations. What does rail mean to all of us? Well, rail has been a proven economic driver, and it means that jobs can come to the area where there is rail, and it promotes a lot more interstate travel. It also allows people to work while they're on the train, and that includes phone conversations, texting, etc., working on computers, where, of course, you really cannot do that whilst driving. And the rail leads us to access to markets, which is just what when we're talking about economic development, and we want to see businesses thrive here, existing businesses, that rail is going to be a driver to help us actually realize that. The companies that do exist here, as I said, we're talking about thriving businesses. We have a lot of manufacturing here as well, and there's a very real possibility that they would also expand. It also means that we have less dependency on gasoline, tolls, and wear and tear on the roads. And ultimately, the goal is to link Bennington further north up through the entire western border into Burlington and on into Canada to Montreal. As I mentioned before, we're talking about an unserved area. And when we talk about the Federal Railroad Administration, they are very highly focused on regional projects, and are looking for ways to really bring areas such as ours into the 21st century and to be able to provide an opportunity for jobs and for people to exchange ideas and travel. And since our area here lacks direct access to interstate highways or any major airport, we view that here locally with our committee, and most people would agree, as that being an impediment to economic development. So I go back to the fact that the economy will definitely improve once we have some rail here. And just for your own edification, the Albany Rensselaer Station, where I think we have the 10th busiest in here in the U.S., it's actually now the 9th busiest rail station. And again, that if you've been to that rail station, you see that there are a lot of opportunities for marketing this area, and I would suggest as we move forward with this that we take full advantage of that. We also have access to Schenectady and beyond, heading west to the country with this rail, and also to the mid-Atlantic states. And one of the other areas I like to talk about a lot is the fact that New York City alone has 4 million people without automobiles, and therefore have no way to get here to southwestern Vermont other than a bus, which, by the way, does not really come through here, or the train. So, and most of them prefer to ride the train. And again, that's a totally untapped market. Again, I'd like to take a look at the whole economic picture here. We have businesses that come in and locate near where there are rail stations. So again, it's new, it's revitalizing existing businesses, and for every $1 billion that is spent on constructing rail, we realize 20,000 jobs. So we're looking here at our project, which is approximately going to cost about 117 to 125 million. So we could realize in southwestern Vermont 2,000 jobs. And that's a real boost to the local economy. Rail, of course, also really helps and aids the environment. And again, moving forward, this is an area that we also need to be very cognizant of. On that note, I'd like to open this up for questions.
Wendy, I want to go back to the two options, just so make sure I understand. The first one you're talking about, the current route that exists between Saratoga and Rutland, that's one of the options going to continue? Mm-hmm. You're going to add another, but that creates another one. So there'll be two trains coming into the state of Vermont, if I understand this right. The other one through Schenectady, Mechanicsville, Hoosick Junction, North Bennington, Manchester, then up to Rutland, right?
And then up to Rutland.
Okay, and the other one is rerouting Ethan Allen service totally, so the one from Saratoga will not go to Rutland, as I understand it?
It would not. That, and as you might imagine, there is quite a bit of consternation over there in eastern New York about that.
Okay, but my question on the second route then, routing Ethan Allen service through Hoosick, Bennington, Manchester. You mean Bennington or you mean North Bennington? Okay, because on our chart it says Bennington. We're still talking North Bennington.
We're still talking North Bennington.
Okay.
North Bennington.
Okay.
And, but, do you have more comments on that or questions?
No, I think, I just want to make sure that's clear. I was going to ask you, if it's Bennington, where do you see it coming into Bennington? And I guess my question to you then, and before I open up the rest of the board, is you're asking for our support. Which one do you want us to support? I mean, we're going to get service either way.
Well, yes, we would get service either way, and that's a very good question. In the real world, oftentimes the dollar dictates a decision, and I will say that rerouting the Ethan Allen is the less expensive of the two. However, as I mentioned earlier, there are negotiations going on between V-Trans and Department of Transportation in New York State to take a look at those subsidies that we have been paying. And so I'm not at liberty to speak about that right now because they haven't finalized those talks. So that $4 million a year is going to be calculated in this whole process.
Okay. Other board members? Justin?
I have one question, but first I just want to thank you for all the work you've done on this. I know how, excuse me, how long you guys have been working on this, Michael too, and you guys have done a very good job. I support it 100%.
Thank you.
The one question I do have is just kind of backing off of what Joe just said. I don't fully understand what the difference is between the two options. Can you try and just go into a little bit more detail about that? Maybe I can get my head wrapped around it.
Yes, and technically, the route that would be coming through here, be it Ethan Allen or the new rail route, would be essentially the same as far as our service here in Vermont. And there will be some upgrades to sidings and things such as that throughout New York State. Again, the big issue is Saratoga Springs.
Okay.
They are not happy about that. And, they have a very active group over there as well. So we'll just have to play it.
So the difference is what happens north of Bennington between Saratoga and Rutland? Am I following this correctly? But it doesn't necessarily directly affect what the route would be through the Bennington, North Benningtons?
No, it does not affect what happens here in southwestern Vermont, and Rutland would still have service.
Okay.
I'm assuming that if the Saratoga line remains the same and we add a route that comes here, it would affect the frequency of the service, more than likely. I mean, I know they probably haven't gotten that far yet, but I would imagine that would be a concern.
Well, there are tables with various possibilities
Right.
concerning
I mean, if you're
that.
sending 4 trains a day to Rutland, it's unlikely you would add a line and send 8 trains a day to Rutland.
No,
I would
and
think,
we're,
you know.
right now, currently looking at 1 train.
Right.
And it's going to be a 5-car train. It would be coming through at I like to say, a civilized time in the morning. And it would be coming in through here and then turning around and going back down into Albany to make other connections and also into New York City. So, for example, I mean, if you felt like it, if you had a meetings in New York or any of those towns along the line that the even Ellen would stop at, you could organize your meeting schedule and go there. You know, for an afternoon meeting, a noontime meeting, or maybe you want to explore some of the cultural events in Manhattan and vice versa.
Yeah. No, I think it's a great idea. The concern, of course, is always Americans and their addiction to their cars.
Right.
And if there's not enough frequency and it's not convenient, people tend to overlook all the other good things about that transportation. So I guess, I mean, that's the negotiation I think Rutland went through a few years ago when they downgraded service at one point, that they were trying to save money, but they were afraid that they were going to throw the whole thing out because it wouldn't be convenient
Well,
enough.
there were a lot of issues I
Right.
think concerning freight as well. And Jim?
A question with respect to who would make the decision about where whether or not it would be Saratoga or our neck of the woods. And I'm just wondering, just thinking out loud, that wouldn't it be predicated on demand? And currently, there is a demand in Saratoga and along that route, and there is, while there may be potential demand here.
Oh, there is most definitely.
Well, how do you determine that?
Yeah.
How do you determine that? I can say I'd like to take the train ride, but...
Between the consultant, Amtrak, our committee provided a lot of information as to the Chambers of Commerce, as well as V-Trans. So there is potential for considerable traffic coming in here. And a lot of it's going to have to, it will be really dependent upon how we market this and what kind of packaging, how creative we get. You know, for example, with some of the hotels, maybe we do a Friday evening coming up to Vermont, and maybe you have a nice party in one of the bars. No, seriously, I mean, things like that happen, and there are nice things that could be used. Yes.
Who ultimately makes this decision, and wouldn't it'll involve federal dollars as well as state, I would imagine?
All federal dollars, and ultimately it is the NRA.
And do we have the
As
ear of
far
our
as-
congressional delegation with respect to this?
They are totally involved in it, they are aware of it. One of the things that we will be doing, that's a very good point you raised, is between now and the end of May, we will be having a letter that I will be co-crafting with the project manager of V-Trans to our local delegation as well as our federal delegation. And so we will have them sign.
And with respect to our state legislature in general, I would hope they're supporting this wildly.
I have not heard anything in the negative about it.
Okay.
Joe? I'm probably going to ask some naive questions. This is just passenger service?
Yes,
Okay.
we're talking about passenger rail, but the rail itself will be upgraded so that it can handle more freight.
Is, a follow-up question, has there been a cost analysis done relative to the two recommended?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, there has been, and there are still, there's more number crunching going on between Amtrak and the two states. And as I said, I'm not really at liberty to even talk about that because I have not seen those numbers yet.
Are we going to be getting a follow-up report, or is this a preliminary one, or where are we in the...
When everything is done before the end of June, I would love to come back, if at all possible, or at least to send Mr. Crozet an email that can then be sent out to all of you.
Thank you.
Okay?
Okay, sure.
Yeah, I had a quick question. It sounds like what we're trying to do is we're fighting for this rail to come through Bennington and North Bennington, and our compromise is to keep it open in New York. I mean, is the rail in New York damaged or needing repair?
No, there's no issue with that. Well, there is some repair that has to happen between Albany, Rensselaer, and Schenectady coming into Vermont through the southern portions. But they know that they need to do that again because rail uses that. And rail really use America. So that's definitely an area that they need to look at. And no one's really fighting over it right now.
No, I just meant like we're pushing to have it in Bennington for that reason.
Well, this has been a long-standing
Right.
concern and a desire to bring passenger rail back to southwestern Vermont.
No, I think it is great because when you look at the road maps, southwestern Vermont is missed completely. So that's where you're looking at the need being in southwestern Vermont, whereas eastern New York does have some major roadways.
Eastern New York actually has 2 routes right now, currently.
Right.
It has the Adirondack, and it also has the Ethan Allen. Michael, did you want to say
No, I
something?
think John raises a good point. The issue is, the studies have shown that the return of passenger rail and the upgrade of the rail bed to accommodate passenger and freight becomes a differentiator for us, and it definitely becomes an economic driver on a new level.
Right, absolutely.
I want that.
And I guess the final thing that I wanted to ask about was the obvious push of an economic growth and helping the industries that are here right now. Starting off as passenger, obviously we wouldn't feel that as much, but are there recent studies done to prove what type of industries are impacted? Are they our current industries, or are we going to still be going air shipments and truck shipments?
I think that's a very good question.
Anybody that ships
Yes.
will benefit from extended rail.
Right.
Anybody
All
that
of
ships.
them. Yeah.
Okay, I just want to make sure, one more time. All right, you have we've had a 2-year study with 6 alternatives, so you narrowed this down to 2. So I'm assuming the other 4 have gone away, they're not being considered?
They're off the map entirely.
So the 2 you presented to us, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, one doesn't have advantage over the other. We're going to get rail service into Bennington either way. And you're asking, so my suggestion to the board is rather than us adopt either option 1 or 2, we craft a letter saying we continue to support passenger service into the area of Bennington for the following reasons, and let New York fight with Vermont on over money and everything else. We don't get into that in Bennington.
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I think, John, you brought up a good point, and if I remember my history right, Wendy, you probably know better than I do, but when the interstates came into Vermont, there was agreement made internally in Vermont that the interstates were going to go there, and we were guaranteed we were going to get the western passenger service up this way. Well, that was years ago. We haven't got it yet. So his promise is not kept, I forget how many years, but many years, probably before you were born. I know the bypass was started before you were born, so we never know.
Didn't take long to get that joke.
Okay. Wendy, let me ask the board. Justin?
One more question, sorry. So the third option of nothing happening at all is no longer on the table, and one of these 2 is going to happen, is that what I'm taking from this?
I would say so, unless the Federal Rail Administration does not want to appropriate.
So the way it looks right now is one of these 2 options, which are both probably good for Bennington, one or the
Yes.
other will happen.
One or the other will happen, and...
You've come a long way to get it to that point.
Actually, I can actually speak to that. Once we receive funding, the project is what is commonly referred to as shovel-ready, and therefore, we're looking at 3 construction seasons. So if we get the money in fiscal year 2014, then we are looking at 2017.
Excellent.
Yeah.
If I understand correctly, and again, you guys are the expert, I read your emails back and forth, but the tracks are already there. The trouble is it's for freight, and to get the passenger, it's got to be upgraded for the additional speed that goes along and the guard and things. That's the issue?
And, and I love, yes. Greg just mentioned the word crossings.
Yes.
And that has been a sticky issue for some of the towns along the western corridor here. I have been speaking with them about that, and throughout this whole process, I have emphasized the need for safety. And I have gone into a lot of detail learning which properties are along that and which properties don't, which get the cross, symbol and flashing lights, and which ones don't, and which ones get gates and which ones don't. They're expensive, but for example, even looking at the limited highway access in East Dorset, where it turns into the regular Route 7, there is a wide crossing there. I have suggested, and it's been put into the report, that there be an advance warning and not just the yellow sign with the cross on it that says RR. I want something that will have lots of lights flashing, because people are driving, they may be driving for hours, or how do you get when you drive for a couple hours and you're sort of hypnotized by the road. So I want people to be aware of the fact that there is indeed the possibility of a train coming there. Same thing with places like East Arlington.
Right.
Yes.
I have one more question about the industrial push. Coming through North Bennington being one of our main uses in Bennington and North Bennington, have we had talks with people of North Bennington about upgrading their station to be more industry friendly?
All of them. Good question. Yes. Matter of fact, in December, we were having a stakeholders meeting, one in Canterville, New York, and one here. And I invited the consultant on behalf of our committee to arrive here a day earlier, if at all possible, or to dedicate several hours so that we can actually walk the tracks at both North Bennington and also at the Arkham site in Manchester. And it was very positive, and it always helps when you have a real visual, sort of placement on where things are going to go, because all the Google Maps in the world don't quite take the place of actually seeing.
Who owns the sidings in North Bennington? That's our Whitman, doesn't he own sidings?
He does.
And isn't he on your rail committee?
He is not in the rail committee. He does get emails about
Okay.
this.
All right.
And we've spoken with him. We are, the study itself and the consultant and V-Trans are very sensitive to the businesses, and that are going to be directly affected by new sidings. And by the way, a 425-foot high-level platform now because of ADA compliance, which came down the pipe last June. So we had to go back and revisit these sites, and that's what we did in December, to see exactly where we could put this 425 feet. And that also involved having conversations with Bennington College, because it would be affecting one of their properties there in North Bennington, partially affecting it. And they're, pardon the pun, on board. So.
But we got to be careful, though, I think. You guys step in if I'm wrong. We should not mix the passenger with the industrial and letter our support, correct? Because...
This is passenger.
Yes, but I don't think we want to confuse the issue on our letter of support on this, because we do have industrial rail into our area now.
Yes.
Okay, and might be some questions later on, who owns the yard, and do other manufacturers want to utilize it? That's not part of this thing.
No,
We're strictly
that's
looking
not
at...
part of that.
Okay, so any board member, go ahead.
I'm sorry, one more question, and I appreciate the safety aspect. There's a culture that goes along with railroad towns, and we haven't had an active railroad in a long time, and then I grew up in a town with railroad, and there is a danger involved.
Yes.
And the way you dissipate some of that danger is with noise, and that's a whole thing. So, I mean, I think a good cultural lesson for the town is good in advance of this, but is there any study that identifies the prospective ridership, or the estimated ridership per day or per month or something like that?
There is our committee, and gosh, Michael, do you have those numbers?
I don't have those.
I can certainly get back to you with those numbers.
Those are embedded in the consultant's estimates.
Okay.
Yes.
So when we get those final results.
Okay, but we have gotten to that point, so that's great. Thank you.
And the numbers that have been provided, many people feel are underestimated, and, that's probably
Yeah.
good.
Yeah, sure.
When you start showing a lot more people, you think, wow, this is very successful. So, yeah.
Great, that's all I've got.
I did want to say one other
Okay.
thing, because I'm just sort of thinking out of the box here with this. When we talk about a railroad culture town, it would probably be, as we move forward, good to us to work with and do trainings with the regional commission and providing some community workshops and marketing tools just to let people know what they can expect.
All right, is there any board member not in support of passenger rail into Bennington? If not, then I think I'll just suggest to have Stuart draft us a letter of general support of rail service, passenger rail. We won't get hung up on option 1 or 2, but just a good, strong letter showing that we are continuing to support the movement to get passenger rail into the southwestern portion of Vermont.
Is that going to our federal as state? Where's that going, that letter?
I would imagine it would go,
Directed to Costa Pappas.
Call attention to the address.
Yes,
Yes.
at the very,
At the very last page of the presentation, there's a list of addresses.
We don't have that, Michael. We don't have that, Michael.
See if there's one on there.
Okay, there's another one?
Maybe. Yes, you do. It's all on the one you have. Yep.
okay,
Yeah,
okay.
there you go.
We would love to hear from you. We would love to hear from you.
Thank you, folks, for coming in. Great study, great report. And
We promise that the brand will be more high-tech than the presentation.
that's fine. Thank you very much.
Here, have some more.
Okay, who's on the far line for the next one? The Battle Day Committee fundraising request. Who wants to get beat up first?
Everybody.
Okay.
I don't think you should have put it quite that way.
Go ahead, Chief.
We come to you tonight to, on the general budget for Battle Day allows for the funding of $10,000. And trying to get fans to the Battle Day Parade this year, we're finding that that's making it very hard to get enough fans to successfully put on the whole parade. The Battle Day Committee has asked me to speak in front of you folks tonight to see if there was any additional funding available for the parade.
Let me ask a few questions. Where's the State Firemen's Convention this year?
The State Firemen's Convention is here, but
Why?
the state has reluctancy on getting anybody that would take the firemen's.
Why don't you just say we do it better than anybody else? That's why they asked us again.
He's lobbing one to you.
Let's just say I was approached several times.
Yes, I know you were. Let me ask you, yeah, it's great that we're hosting it, because I think the last time it really brought a lot of folks into Bennington, but the issue is money. So what do you think you're asking for? What did we give you last year when you brought the Firemen's Convention down here?
Last year, when I approached you folks, you gave us an additional $7,000.
Okay.
On top of the $10,000 that was already there. This year, if we could get even $3,000 to $5,000 would be enough where we would be comfortable at holding a nice parade.
Have you asked for any private donations from any of the organizations or other employers in town?
We're always trying to seek donations and ways of doing it. In our last couple of years, we even we put sponsorships on our tickets now for folks, just to pay for the tickets and try to seek the different avenues of ways that we can increase revenue.
Okay. Board members, Craig?
Do you have an estimate how many people that brings to town for the meeting?
For the convention?
Yeah, for the convention.
The Firefighters Convention successfully would bring in probably 700 firemen to the area,
Right.
as well as their families.
As well as guests and whatnot.
And stuff like that. And as far as people for the parade, Stuart could probably answer that a lot better than I could, but usually the turnout's pretty.
The parade's always, I mean, I think you guys do a great job, and I think you do a very admirable job of fundraising and looking for sponsors and partners and that. So I would support at some level.
Okay, Tom?
How many more bands do you expect to get if we met your request?
The bands are running anywhere from 1,200 to 3,000, depending on the band and the length of travel they have to do. Is the balance of transportation expenses, fuel for the bus, and what the charter bus charges to come up here is the driving cost.
And this 10,000 is what was budgeted this year?
Yes.
And that's pretty much what was last year too, or?
No, it was more last year because we had a state firemen's convention here last year. They asked for additional funds in the budget process, and we gave it to them.
Okay,
This was unsuspected this year.
okay,
We knew ahead of time last year.
okay. You know, I think the activity that this generates for that weekend is a $3,000 to $5,000 investment is a good one. And frankly, I would support it too.
The other board members?
I would
Yeah, I'd
support it at
support it.
last year's level.
Let's, we'll decide on level in a minute. Justin, you got any core?
My only concern is where we would pull the funds from. And I appreciate everything you guys do as well, and I certainly support the parade. My concern is, where do we have this money allocated now, and how do we pull it away to give it to something else?
Good question. We'll get that in a minute. John?
I have nothing.
Sharon, you got anything?
No, I would support it
Questions to you,
also.
Stuart. Where do we get the money?
We have a $10,000 contingency in the general fund, and that really is the only place where,
How much did we draw on in contingency last year?
other than the $7,000
Right.
that went to the parade, there was several $100 in minor expenses.
Okay, folks, we have $10,000 contingency we, the select board, has that we budgeted for. And as Stuart said, we gave $7,000 out of it last year and had a few hundred more, so I'll entertain a motion from anyone.
I guess I would just say I'm unconcerned with spending 50% of that contingency fee fund, here today in April. This is for the fiscal 14 budget?
This is
Yes.
fiscal 14, so it would be August,
Fiscal
yeah.
14 calendar year, we're going to expend 50% of our contingency fee, or fund, I keep saying fee, before we started the fiscal year.
Well, I don't think we've said 50%. I'm waiting for a
Well,
motion.
yes,
to see how much-
yeah.
He's asked.
He's asked, we spent more than that last year. We spent more
He's
than
asked, and
50%.
it's up to us to
I'd like
decide
to
what.
make a motion that we keep it at the rate that it was last year, given the economic shot in the arm that it was to the town over that weekend. I'd say keep it at 7,000.
Yeah, we'll have a motion for 7.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Yeah, I think we should talk about it in a minute. I mean,
Yeah.
I philosophically, I'm all on board with making Battle Day as good a foot forward as we can. I mean, if you look at the coverage that Bennington got from the Veterans Parade that was put on yesterday, those type of events, I mean, it's the only town I know of that has its own holiday, and I think the fire department has done a great job of taking ownership of that holiday and making it a very special thing for Bennington. I share Justin's concern. I don't like spending half of my savings the first month of the fiscal year. I mean, I see it as besides, a civic duty, it's also a huge marketing expense for Bennington. And perhaps we ought to look at it a little differently if we're going to be coming around adding to the budget and pulling out of the contingency year after year to make this thing work. We might want to look at some other funding options. I'd be comfortable, I think I'd be comfortable at half. I'm a little worried about 7. And I'd also like to, add the push to get some, with the private funding and help these guys. They're doing a lot of work to get more funding on their own. I've been talking to Mary and Dan about that, and they really are putting a foot forward to try and get some funding on their own. And obviously, they have to make commitments at this time of year to make this happen. So that's
Up
where.
to 5,000.
Oh, wait a minute, I've got a motion and a second.
He's got a motion.
I know he does.
Yeah, right.
So, any other discussion on the motion that's on the floor?
I feel,
Sorry, go ahead.
no, go ahead, Justin.
No, Tom, go.
I feel the same way. I wouldn't want to use half of my savings or more one time this early, but I do think as a point of helping you get your funding and also going to the other private participants that we should come up with a number. And I was thinking in the 3 to 5 area, frankly. And if it was amended to 5,000, I could support it.
I'll make an amendment to my motion that we raise the fee to 5,000.
Okay, he's reconsidered re-motion. You going to second?
Yes.
So the motion is now,
Just before, just to clarify, with that $5,000, you're going to possibly only be able to get one extra band at $3,000. That was the band fee. It could be $1,200 to $3,000, and then the $2,000 would go towards other things as well.
Right, the 12 to 3,000, what we do is I put our Craig chairman on it, and he would try to he can get 3 bands for the extra $5,000. That's what we're going to do. If he can get 2 for 2 different prices, he looks them over really well and tries to get the best. He's been doing it a long time, so he tries to get the best bang for the buck as far as getting the bands up here and stuff like that.
okay, so we've got a new motion, then it's Justin.
Well, folks, what I'm about to say has nothing to do with the hard work you guys put into this, believe me when I say that. What I would really like this board to do is think about what could also come down the road in the next year as we look to expend 50% of this fund tonight before we even get into the fiscal year.
I just look at the history, maybe I need some more edification on previous years. I heard last year the only use was this particular contingency where you invaded that fund.
The only other time I can remember my time is didn't we give the chamber some for that bulletin board we put in New York State?
We also supported one year one of the events at the museum.
That's right, too.
I think, didn't we take some money out for, actually, didn't we take some money out for this economic development study a couple years ago? I think we gave some money to Debbie. I'm not sure.
I think that came out of your...
Match that, yeah. I know we gave WBT some money for a generator. I mean,
Yeah, we've hit the contingency for a number of different reasons. I think there were 2 years that we actually budgeted $15,000 for Battle Day, and then when things got tougher, that was one of the places that we had to reduce it back to the $10,000, which historically it's been $10,000.
and I'm not saying any one cause is any more worthy or less worthy than another, believe me. But when I look at a contingency fund too, I don't, I just see something negative happening where we need funds appropriated to a spot that's glaring, as opposed to something that's, we have some discretion in how we spend it. And I hope it never comes down to the fact where we're desperate for $10,000, but we put it there for a reason.
Okay. Any other discussion? I have a motion for 5,000 and a second. All in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All opposed? 2. Motion passed. 5,000. I think also, Stuart, we've been successful in the past from our board level of asking for donations. I'm thinking now like at 4th of July fireworks, maybe we need to put something in your next article asking if there's any of our people out there that would like to help us out so they get more bands. I know it's expensive. I know you are getting some private donations, but it is a big thing, so.
I mean, Joe, I'd like to echo that with, this is the volunteer fire department that volunteers to run Battle Day for us, pretty much.
Right.
And Battle Day is one of those events that all ages and all economic backgrounds and all social backgrounds come out and have something to do, and it gets the town together, and I think the more we can get the town together, the better town we're going to have. And so I do want to thank you guys, and I do appreciate Justin's concerns. And
I thank you as well.
And
I look
think-
forward to Battle Day every year. I'll be there.
Yeah.
It's something that's good for Bennington, and I don't dispute that at all, and I know how much hard work you volunteer to put into it. It's not the fact that you guys don't do a good job, it's just my concern about spending that money this soon. And that's a board issue for us to look at budget time also.
I think it's a good position to take, Justin, and I appreciate it too, because this sounds like it should be a budgetary consideration at the time we work on the budget.
That's why they should to tell us if they're going to make it a statewide event here next year before the budget process.
At that time, would you let us know?
If I knew.
With the board's permission, I'd like to ask Stuart to draft a letter from my signature to the Adjutant General of the State of Vermont asking for the Vermont State National Guard band from my signature, please. And not as president, or not as chairman of the select board either. And I think I'll hand carry that up there. See if we can get you the band, all right? He owes me one. We'll see whether he wants to pay it back or not. Okay. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Next item on the agenda, the Bennington Strategic Economic Development Plan discussion. Did everybody get the memo I asked Dan to send to you?
Yes. Yep, yes.
That's what we're going to do tonight. And Justin, you weren't there with us the other night when we went over it. I think we
I didn't
did,
get a hard copy.
yeah. I think it was, have you had a chance to look at the priorities?
Yeah, I've been through it, I've read the thing covered.
I think what we kind of informally agreed on the other night is, we kind of agreed with the 10 priorities, and tonight, my intention was just to take a look at them and see if we want to put them in the order they're in now, we want to change them around. We're following what Dan has suggested, see if we can pick out of those 10, either 2 or 3 or maybe 4 that we can take and make for short-term objectives that we can see accomplished, or some significant movement in the next 90 days.
Sure.
And I kind of think that's where I'd like this discussion to go, so, everybody have any ideas? Go ahead, Justin, you go ahead, Zena, you weren't there, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm a little bit concerned with what we got back here, because I feel like it's a lot, I say a little, but I feel it's a lot more general than what I thought we were gonna get.
I'm going to ask you, Justin, to do what I asked them the other night to do. Tell us what page you're talking on,
Okay.
because
Well, let me just-
before you got,
Yeah.
I was confused too. I mean, you got to put all these charts together.
No, I know, it is,
In order
I
to
guess
make
it's a
sense.
general statement, I thought we were gonna have maybe some more specific direction on which way to go.
Okay, let's ask, Mike, you want to come up to the mic? Dan, you want to come with him, or?
Hiding back there.
Yeah, don't hide back there, guys. Okay. So let's get the specifics, and let's direct them at our economic development guy and the guy who was here, okay?
Yeah, somebody else can, say what they want to say while I look through this a little bit, and I'll bring up specifics in a minute.
Okay. Let's take on the first. Anybody want to change the priority that's listed in the first 10 objectives?
What page are you on, Joe?
Implementation.
The implementation plan.
Yeah, the information, yeah,
That's a separate.
separate thing. It's,
10, no,
actually, let's go to page 49. It's just as easy to follow, and I think with the X's in there might help be more specific, makes it more specific.
Just to go along with what Justin mentioned, I will say just that this isn't the final plan. So part of what our goal is to identify concrete objectives and then get into the much more specific activities for those reasons. So the reason it's probably not in the detail too is because this isn't the final draft.
So the consultant that we paid is going to look at this again and come back with more information?
Well, the idea, this was a work session, I know you missed it, but that was an opportunity to ask the consultant.
I read out the minutes and everything, so I'm aware of
Right.
what you're talking about.
So I don't want anybody to think that this was a final, this is an opportunity for the select board to give feedback, for us to revise the plan in accordance with your concerns. We weren't really sure, in fact, we didn't think that we'd get into specifics tonight, but we were looking for a direction, perhaps at the next time, to really focus on what we were hoping was the 90-day action agenda, which is really where we get into the specifics of what the select board would really like to accomplish in the next 90 days. And, but, of course, the first order of business is to make sure you folks are okay with the underlying document, when we layer that 90-day action agenda on top of that.
Okay.
Just to address, I don't have a hard copy of your email, but I do want to tell you that among the downtown objectives, in conversations with Karen Gross, the president of SVC, she and I are working along with Bennington College to accomplish those first 2 objectives of Wi-Fi hotspot in combination with a campus store with SVC and Bennington College, and hopefully CCB as well, that would be tied to a college degree that would go towards a student or students from SVC that would run the store and get real-time business experience.
Again, let's go back to the board, the 10 strategic actions that are listed on page 49. Does anybody disagree with those?
Well, I'm not disagreeing with the 10, as it were, but I just don't want to get into a situation where we've got window dressing, and I think that's what the board's concerned with.
Right.
We want to see a plan that has something meat on the bones here. And frankly, when we're talking about the various months, I'd rather prioritize it pursuant to the time frames like there's a 3 to 6 months, let's deal with that and bite that off and and I think that's what Dan's sort of referring to
Yeah.
at this point. But as far as the goals, they're fine, but they're so general that doesn't give me a lot of substance that I can hang my hat on.
Okay, that's where we're going to get to the specifics, and you go there. All right, Dr. Mullins talked about the free high Wi-Fi hotspot's a big area no matter where they've gone, correct? And I'm told you've been working on that already, and it's pretty much, can that be completed in 90 days?
Not without significant funding. So I can tell you what we've worked on in the past. Many of you probably know of Long Trail Wireless that exists in the downtown. It's not necessarily owned by any one organization or controlled by any one organization. It uses already existing Wi-Fi hotspots that exist in businesses already, and they've allowed e-Enable to go in and make part of that network public for others to use. But there was a grant that came out through VCRD, Vermont Council on Rural Development, where they would support the growth of Wi-Fi in downtowns. And so we did apply for that. I haven't heard back in terms of where we're at with that. There's also another company that does provide Wi-Fi technology in different downtowns called Summit Technology. They've been in and they've spoken with us in the past about what it would take to have a network that could sustain the usage, because in all honesty, Long Trail is a nice to have, but it doesn't provide the stability and the bandwidth that's needed for regular heavy use.
But we have hotspots right now in the downtown area.
Right.
Do you have a map of where they are?
I don't, but I know Ron from e-Enable does. He and I have talked about it, and I can tell you where some of them are. The interesting thing, again, because the way it works is it's up for the business owner to provide the hardware. And so what happens when you get that is that you don't always get the highest caliber hardware. You get what they feel they can afford in their establishment. But, it does exist at South Street Cafe. It did exist, and I believe it still does, in a little bit in North Bennington around Powers Market. It exists at Nova May Cafe. So there's some of these community-type locations that cater to that type of individual looking to get online, do work, those sorts of things.
There are 2 other locations too, the bookstore in Madison's.
Yeah.
Okay, then, you've already applied for the grant.
Yeah.
You're pretty certain you know where the spots are now, or let's put it this way, you know where there isn't coverage now.
Yeah, I mean, our vision would be to have the funding and the support needed to have it cover pretty much the downtown improvement district in terms of along Main Street, up part of North Street, down part of South Street, and that would give us some really good comprehensive coverage.
What about where we have our park by the blacksmith shop?
Currently, I'm not aware of any public Wi-Fi there. So there's Wi-Fi, but it's not open to the public.
Okay, and maybe I misunderstood Mullins, because I was looking at things that the town has. I mean, if Madison's has it, that's great, okay? That's something he's doing to bring the customers in. I thought it was more the areas the common areas the town has control over that we're going to be looking at bringing the Wi-Fi in.
I definitely think those should be the top on our list, because it's stuff that's within our control. It doesn't require any agreement with a landowner. I know that the library is also looking to bring in wireless as well. And it's not necessarily a high expense item. It is when you start talking about hotspots that cover extensive distances. But if you're looking for one area, like if you wanted to do this room as a hotspot, a public hotspot, that wouldn't be a significant cost.
How many service providers do we have in the downtown area?
When you said, just give me clarification on service provider.
Well, don't we have, who's in the Putnam complex? Isn't there a phone service there?
Verizon.
Verizon? No, any other ones besides Verizon in the downtown area? Sprint? That's
It's
it?
right down the street.
Have we gone to them?
No, I have not directly.
Geez, I would think they'd want to have it in here.
Right.
Advertise their thing. I think we need to go there. So I guess, I'm asking the
They
board.
may have public Wi-Fi, but they don't belong to the Long Trail connection.
Here's what I'm asking the board, is this one of the 90-day ones we want to pursue to see if we can get that in this area?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's one of them. Now, I've heard from President Karen, as well as you have, that they want to do this bookstore intern program. It's actually an intern program they're going to do down here, too. And are you sure she wants to come in front of the board in the next meeting or so?
That, in our last conversation, she said that she would like to come and roll it out.
Okay,
Which
I think
action?
we could even include the high school in that, because they have business courses, and the high school has stuff to sell.
Tom, what it was is that at some point in time, this happened, goes back maybe a year or so ago, there was talk about bringing a bookstore, college bookstore in the downtown area from Southern Vermont
Jim
College.
mentioned that.
And then they were
We
going to
did
talk.
have one briefly, I
Yeah, they
think,
had
in
one
the
briefly, I
Putnam.
think, in the Putnam. And then whatever happened, it didn't continue.
They
But
couldn't get students to show up.
But now they're looking at Bennington College, and she just suggested maybe we might include the high school also. And my suggestion is, do we want to invite President Gross to one of our meetings here to give us her ideas? You know, she seems to be one taking the lead on this thing.
Yes.
And she also has the intern program, doesn't she?
Yes, I can't recall.
For the town?
Yes, I can't recall the name of it.
Stuart, you know what that program is she's got with the town where the students come here in an intern program?
I don't, Joe.
Okay.
I guess I'm just missing, Joe, where that is prioritized. Maybe I'm missing the,
Number 2.
okay, number 2. That doesn't say anything about Wi-Fi or...
No, it's in Dan's email, the overview of our
Oh,
meeting with Mullen.
We're just
Yeah.
revisiting that, okay.
And I guess, you know, you could say that one, the Wi-Fi kind of covers a bunch of them. If you want to look through that, you know, you got to have the communications. But this other one is to establish, and it goes on number 2, yeah, the campus downtown bookstore kind of thing.
I have a question about the bookstore. Would that be different places for each entity? Would SVC have their bookstore?
No.
No, would
The
it?
idea, the plan is to combine, it would be a joint operation between CCB, Bennington College, and SVC, providing, with particular focus for Bennington College students, gallery space to show their stuff, because historically, when Bennington College students display their work, it's done on campus. And there's sort of this invisible wall for Benningtonians not to get in there and see it. So bringing that downtown, not only do they have an opportunity to sell it, but Benningtonians have an opportunity to interact with Bennington students and vice versa.
Justin?
I guess back to my original concern that I made, where I felt like some of this was rather general in nature. I'm just a little bit concerned that picking strategic objectives tonight is a little bit, we're getting a little bit of our head of ourselves, because I'm not really sure what exactly we're trying to select. And then just as an example of the generalizations that I think permeate this report, if you go to page 35, number 5 on the list is research growth industries for the next 10 years and identify methods to attract or incubate selected entities to the Bennington region. Special attention should be given to critical parts of the value chain, and I don't need to consider on that now, but I guess what I was hoping to get from this was, instead of this report coming back and telling us to identify what we should be doing, I was hoping the report would have gone ahead and identified.
Justin, I would say that it has.
Okay.
We've identified the top 10.
Okay, so what would that one be then, Dan? You know, and just to get a better idea, because I'm not understanding this, I guess. What has been identified as that growth industry? And how would we incubate it and get it here, I guess, is the question.
I'd like to interject for one moment here. I was under the understanding, Joe, that we were operating from the email that...
We were doing both.
And that is listed the priorities.
Right.
Okay, but I mean, I have this right here, Jim.
Well, that we used from our working meeting
But
that we had last week.
But I have a
From
question
that-
about what we've received from this, I guess.
Well, let me break in here. Give you an example. Again, from this report, going through it again, and listening to Mullen's brief the other day, schools, 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 schools. The day after the banner printed the article, I get a call or email from the chairman of the CDC board who wants to meet with the select board based on what he said.
No, I got the same email.
And I'm sitting there saying, well, yeah, you're on the board, right?
I wasn't.
You were.
Not currently, but
Okay.
CC'd me a copy of it.
And, you know, my question to Dr. Mullins is, we got a lot of school boards, where do we get? And one of the things I was going to, when we got down to schools, say, hey, that's something we can do quickly. We can go ahead to the boards we feel that we have contact with, BSC, MAU, SVSU, and CDC. We ought to try to set up, we take the lead, set up a combined work session like we tried, how many years ago?
A few.
A few years ago, that the schools didn't want to participate in, but now it seems like schools want to participate with the select board to see if we can all come together as a community and talk about what should the priorities be in the development, the educational development of our children. And I think that's a great idea, and I think that's something we can do within the next 90 days. I think we can do that in the next 30
I
days.
agree. I'm just scared that we're going to get lost in generalizations, and when it comes for time to implement things, it's going to go away. And that's, I don't want that route to, that's the route that this ends up being. I think we just need very specific things to move forward on, or we're going to get nowhere.
Well, I agree with you, and I think that's why I've asked Dan to take and outline some of these things in these areas. We don't have to pick them all out. These are collectively in those first top 10 priorities. They kind of fit in there.
Maybe some of the confusion is, there's two things going on. The first item, and because there wasn't a lot of discussion at the work session, I assume that perhaps most people were relatively comfortable with the top 10 priorities. The first item is, if you folks don't feel comfortable with these top 10 action items, let us know. If you want to reorder them, if you want to take some other ones from the below, the ones that are the 35 that are below that, bring them to the top. This is your plan, we're hoping that you'll feel comfortable.
And you are talking about, it starts on page 34 here, that's what we're doing.
I'm talking about the action items, page
49,
right?
Start at 39.
You start on page 49.
Okay, so this is different.
Right.
The top 10 were prioritized by the steering committee as a suggestion only. For you folks, if you don't think those are the top 10, let us know. There are a total of 40 action items that were identified, and the steering committee made an effort to prioritize the top 10 so that there could be a certain focus. Now, those top 10 are intended to implement the objectives, the goals and objectives that are articulated earlier in the plan. So that's number one. You folks need to feel relatively comfortable that this is something you can sign on to. That's the first step. What Joe had suggested, and I think it's a great idea, and it was discussed at length at the work session, was another, as part of that, as a subsection of that, as a way to get the community excited, as a way to jumpstart this activity. Let's pick 2, 3, 4 items that we can check off in 90 days and say, look, we're working towards implementing this. These are certain parts of the actions that we're trying to accomplish over however long in the future. And these are ones that we can check off right off the bat to show that we're making strides immediately. So there's two things there, really. We want you folks to comment on the plan that we've presented to you. Is it good? Is it bad? What else do you want? Do you want to reorder? And then in addition to that is we'd like to add into this plan a 90-day agenda, 90-day action plan for us to all rally around and focus on completing within that 90-day period.
So when I look at these 10 strategic actions, what would the end goal be for all of the 10? I mean, there has to be one common goal that they're all coming together and trying to accomplish. And what does that define?
Well, actually, if you look at the plan, there's several goals, and it lists the objectives met, as well as what we consider the lead organization and who the support organizations and what the time to complete are. So all that's in there.
Explain the objectives met for them. Maybe that'll help clear some of it up.
I'd like to just speak.
Well, let Dan finish this, Justin's question.
Well, if you read through the plan, we list the goals and objectives. Those are the general. You have to start with the general and go to the specific. So we list the general goals and objectives, and then we made an effort working with the consultant and with the steering committee to come up with specific actions that can be accomplished to achieve those goals and objectives.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but at our session, what were you calling that meeting last week?
The work session?
Yes. We reprioritized, remember?
There were a couple things that and we
Right, the top 3, I believe it was, we changed the position. And just to fill you in a little bit, because I've been a part of this steering committee, we've looked at short-range goals as well as long-range goals, and like Joe said, it continues to come back to education, 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 over and over and over again, when it comes to quality workforce, retaining people here in town. So in some, it's long-term and short-term goals. But I take your point that, we want to see some action.
Let me go ahead. Just to answer Justin's concerns, that's important. If you look at page 30, we build in some success measures to say, with regard to our goals and objectives, to try to measure how we're making progress on the things that we have said are important. And if you go through that, page 30, 31, 32, and so forth, you can see that we've tried to build in fairly objective measures to try to say, hey, are we making progress? We're not, so we need to modify our plan, come up with new strategies, etc. This document isn't, once you folks say, hey, we're happy with this, it's not dead. It's not a static document. You're going to have to come up with, we have some suggestions, but you may have some other suggestions. You have to come up with a way for this to be continually pushed, continually monitored, so that we can work in the months, years, decade to come to make sure that we stay on task.
Sure, and I'm not looking at this and saying it's, there's nothing in here that's valuable, and I want you to take that at all. I'm just concerned about long-term generalizations as opposed to short-term specific stuff, and what we can be doing in the here and now, while you figure out some of the stuff that's, when I see stuff that's listed for years down the road, I'm thinking, wow, that's gonna get lost somewhere in translation, and we're gonna be stuck with, status quo.
And I think that, to Joe's point, and to Mullen, Dr. Mullen, you really need to have those items that you can come out of the gate and show progress. Economic development is a long-term game, though. You can't, nothing, as you know, nothing accomplished overnight. You have to keep at it, Sometimes, it may take 4, 5, 6 years, a decade to accomplish a goal. But the important thing is to make sure that you're measuring success and you're moving forward, and that you're constantly reevaluating whether you're doing the right thing.
I'll give you one that again, an email we got out here, develop a fund for Bennington enhancement projects, $100,000 a year. That's not something we're going to be able to do in this, we've already approved our budget. The voters have already approved our budget. That's not something that's going to get done in the next 90 days. The school thing, I think we can do. One of the things is on the transportation piece, the community calendar, we've heard this now for over a year. The work's already been worked on the community calendar. I think that thing, somebody's got to put their stamp on it and says, this is our community calendar, get it out there. We started working on this.
This close.
Okay, that close, okay.
Oh, and it's part of
And part of this thing too is bringing it out to the public, and we got it. And, we were surprised, I guess, last spring at this time, and we had the rural development guys down here, helps, the outsiders were surprised at how many things we do have going in Bennington, but people don't know about them, because we don't have one community calendar that goes out there. We've got a whole bunch of other stuff. So I guess, if I can focus this again, get back to these objectives, the 10 objectives, the priorities here. And I won't ask you tonight, we'll bring it up the next time. But look at them one more time and see if you want to drop out number 9, you want to bring in number 11, or whatever the case may be, and we'll talk about that the next time. There are 40 of them out there. Mm-hmm. And the steering committee is probably...
Feel free to pick other ones if you think
right. The steering committee, this is their best guess of what they thought based on what they saw here and what we think that we've asked them to do. So for the next meeting, I want you to look at those 10, see if they're there, and if you want to change your priorities. But I have no problem. If we want to bring number 39 in and place it number 1, if we feel strongly that's going to move toward the objective we want, it's fine. But what I'd like to do there...
I mean, one of the things you mentioned at that session, which I think is critical, is that when you reference page 35, Justin, those were as the group began to pick out what should we be doing next in the next 90 days or a few months. The number 5 that you referenced was one of those things. What can we do next? And their idea for that action was, identify those industries that for the next 10 years are the top industries, and how do we bring those to fruition? And that goes back to, I think, what was brought up by Joe, which is number 3 in that, and really making sure, like, you have an owner that's going to make sure that they're taking each one of these actions and tracking them out over the next, whether it's 3 months, 3 years, to say, we're making progress on this. And so I think, Bill would probably shoot us both if we didn't mention the importance of also formalizing
Right.
the Economic Development Task Force to be the shepherd of this plan. Or some other organization, but an owner to shepherd the plan forward to move it and keep track.
Okay, see how you brought that up, and I was going to. I want you all to consider that too for our next meeting. Do we want to formalize, who do we want to take the lead on this thing? Do we want the task force that's already out there how many members on that task force now? 15, 20? Do we want them to continue the work, but actually formalize it as a committee working for the town, or continue the way they've been doing it now? I don't want an answer now, but I want you to think about that for the next one, okay?
Joe, I don't want to jump to next week or 2 weeks from now, but it seems to me the plan is the plan, whether it's 1 or 50. Priority, we're going to be talking about timelines. I would rather see it presented in the form of time to complete, and use the shortest period of time as the priority, and you go down that route, rather than try to use some outside date for a priority that we haven't got to, because we're going to be dealing with something before that. By way of example, I think the formalization is probably one of the earliest charges.
That would be number
That's number 1. And then you go back.
As a matter of fact, in our sessions, we did identify timeframes for specific goals that are included in, not on those sheets, but later in other parts of this, where we do put a specific timeframe on objectives.
The only thing I would say to that, and I understand what you meant, but just because something can be accomplished in 90 days doesn't necessarily mean that it's the top priority.
Exactly.
So,
Yeah.
I think, and we've talked about, the steering committee talked about this, and Bill's talked about it, Dr. Mullins talked about it. What we want to do is make sure that whatever the top 10 are, it's all things that you collectively, the select board, are really passionate about and want to give the community a charge to accomplish. If you guys are lukewarm about them, we haven't gotten where we need to be. We want to make sure that, whatever those top 10 are, everyone's going to get their feelings hurt and pick 10 different ones.
I don't know, but this seems like apple pie and Chevrolets.
Yeah.
How can you be anything other than fully supportive of the plan? But I think we've got to prioritize the timelines to get to those. And so I can see how things are unfolding, and if I can see it, the community should be able to see that.
I think that's what I'm asking for, Tom. Look at it next week. The first thing we're going to ask for next week is, do we want to formalize the Bennington Economic Development Task Force, I think as it's called now, into what we say? We've never put holy water on that thing. These are a bunch of people that come together, they've been working very hard, and do we want to formalize it? My position is, yeah, we do, but let's make sure we think about it. Same thing here. Yes, it's apple pie, and we're going to get in those specifics. But the specifics is what we're going to be getting with when we look at the stuff that Dan provided us. I mentioned the schools. I think that's something we as a board can go to the town manager and say, Stuart, coordinate with those, if we agree those are the key players, coordinate a time when us can sit together in this firehouse and talk about those things we need to do to enhance the education of our system, of our children, to where we're all pulling in the same direction, to where we don't have the school board coming up asking for us to give them a right-of-way on School Street to build a turning lane. That's our role in it. We should have a bigger role in that, according to everything, studies we've heard. The other thing is, invite President Gross in here to talk about where she stands on this, to bring Mike in. Mike, show us that map of the Wi-Fi, where the cover is, and what do we have to do to get it? Is it 90 days we can get it in? Or is it going to take 180 days, or what it's going to do? So we have going there. The employer recognition program, I don't have a clue. Maybe that's something that's as simple as...
We used to do that with a dinner a few years ago with Leonid Garter.
That's right, I remember that. You got that started. That started and it died. I mean, is that something we want to resurrect? One of the issues came up about the transportation for the college kids on Friday and Saturday nights. President of the board.
I'm looking at that.
I mean, we've got a handle on this one. She can come back and tell us, is that feasible to increase the bus line service on Fridays and Saturdays, I guess, primarily, in order for the college students to come down here in Bennington and do whatever they want to do. So those are things we can do quickly, and if they can make them happen, people can see they're happening. And,
I think at some point, there is going to be, somebody's going to need to be in charge of this to create a work plan out of what gets prioritized, so that the longer-term, more generalized goals can be, combined with shorter-term initiatives, so we can keep them in rank. I mean, it's just, having been on boards with overloaded workloads, you don't get things done. You can put dates on them, so somebody needs to own it and decide what is practical, coordinate these organizations that are identified as the lead and support organizations, which are the organizations that make up the Economic Development Task Force, and distribute this, the work and oversee it. And, because this board changes every year. This report, its goals and whatnot can outlast any board around here, and I think, if we can do that work and get that rolling, that's well worth the effort, so.
okay, let me ask Dan, because you were on it, and Mike on it. Who is the current chairman of the Economic Development Task Force?
There's not a chairman.
There's my point, folks. We got to formalize this thing. Okay, and I'm not asking us to do it tonight. Think about this. I mean, I would think you got to have a chair, and you got to have a vice chair, and these are the people we're going to hold accountable to see that these tasks get done. Who's going to do them and get done and report back to us and the community, correct?
That's the idea, and I can tell you that the majority of the folks that I've spoken to on the task force are very anxious to get a plan that they can work off of and then develop. Just like Greg said, we have committees, we have folks that are going to, like you said, own these things, and we're going to work to develop work plans and make sure that we measure success. And that's the only way that any organization, whether it's a task force or some other organization that you folks put together, is going to be able to move forward. You as the select board, you don't have
the time.
70 folks, and the staff, there's not enough staff to accomplish these things. We have to reach out to the community and make sure we have buy-in and make sure that everybody's pulling in the same direction. Because none of this stuff can happen with just municipal government. In fact, it's just impossible. And so we really have to reach out to our partners.
If we're going to formalize it, I would think we're going to have to do like we do right now with every other board we do. We're going to have to point people to those positions. Am I wrong?
No.
If we formalize this, are we going to just say you're going to elect your own chair and vice chair, and you can have 30 people, 40 people, 10 people, 5 people? Dan?
I'd like a recommendation from our administration as to how it would be structured, because you've been real close to it. And
Go ahead.
I think the best thing to do, honestly, is just let's have a meeting and make sure everybody feels comfortable with the way forward.
You mean with the task force? Okay, so why don't we ask you to do that? Hold a meeting for our next board, come to us with a proposal, what the board should look like, and how people should be appointed to it.
We want to make sure that they want to do the work.
Sure. I mean, they volunteered on top of their volunteer positions to do this. And one of the things I'm concerned about, and I'd love to hear a recommendation from the task force, is to what that board should look like as far as representatives from different organizations, different parts of the community, different, economic, how big should it be? I mean, I don't think we want to create a board that has 40 people on it that, you can't replace. I think it needs to be a functional thing that they're comfortable with and they feel that they can continue.
And you have, not to put a lot of pressure on Mike, but you have a direct conduit, somebody who can communicate back and forth directly.
Dan, when did you guys typically meet? It was like 5:30?
We meet at
8 a.m. the third Monday of every month.
Oh, the meeting I went to was...
So, again, can we ask them to have this meeting, come back to us, our next meeting with a straw man and what that board should look like, what the representation should be. Going back again to Mullins and other things, is that you don't pick the CEOs of an organization if you expect the board to go anywhere. You got to pick somebody that's going to be available to attend these meetings and do the work. So, can you do that for us? Huh? Yeah, I know you have. So, is that all right with the board to come back with us, and we'll make that decision first, and then I'm asking the board to look at these priorities, but I want to ask tonight, are the things we can move forward now? Is the board willing to ask Stuart to go ahead and coordinate this meeting with school boards at some point in time, workshop?
I'd like to see that.
Yeah.
That's something we can move on right now, and I think we need to do that. The fact that Mike's already working on the Wi-Fi, let him continue to work with that and get us has anybody seen a map? Do you know where the coverage is now in downtown Bennington? I don't know.
I haven't seen it, but it's been a while.
I can't get it at the bank.
Okay, so can you get us that, Mike, for our next meeting?
Sure, I can let you know where the spots are.
And then also, along with that, tell us, where do we go get the money? And I would also ask you to just informally or formally, talk to Verizon and talk to Sprint and say, hey, guys, you're the providers downtown. What can you do for us to advertise your company that you're so grandiose? You're going to give us some coverage in our blacksmith shop.
Well, and most of those come also from places like Comcast.
Right. Well, sure, any place you can go. Touch bases there, tell us where you can go so we can see if this can get accomplished. And I think the other one, because we've heard some about it, is the college bookstore down here. Is if we can get the president to come down at her convenience to one of our meetings when she's ready to tell us what the idea is. Is that fair enough to get started with, folks?
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay. All right, so I think we've got a plan now. And Justin, point well taken as far as, but it is a draft, and what's going to get finalized is when we formalize this task force, we're going to see, I think, the things you want, because we're going to be telling that board what they're going to come back to us with, okay?
I've got just one
Go ahead.
question, Dan. Remember, we reshuffled the top 3 priorities. Can we get, particularly Justin, can he get a copy of that?
Well, the idea is that once you folks have finished your comments, which I assume is going to be next meeting, then Bill will take it back and he's going to rework this.
Okay. The whole thing.
We'll look at, and we're hoping that you'll feel comfortable enough with it, that you'll adopt it and move forward.
Okay. Thanks, Dan. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave.
Okay, I'm ready to play baseball.
Still a lot of people here.
Feels
Get enough
important.
routine.
Stuart, what have we gained since our last meeting on the recreation field use policy review?
Well, you have in your packet some additional research that Larry McLeod did to discuss our policy with other towns who have similar policies, albeit a little bit more expensive than ours. You'll also note that the high school and the town now have the same policy for renting of fields and for the use of fields. And I learned today from my recreation director that many organizations are signing up. And so the policy is in place, people are taking advantage of it. I'm not entirely sure where you would like us to go with.
So what's your recommendation from Larry and your staff's position?
We think that the field use policy is probably one of the least expensive of those that we've looked at, and that in order for us to provide, I think, the necessary field protection and field maintenance, we ought to leave the policy in place. It's being utilized and people are signing up.
Okay. Board members?
We're talking about strictly the women's youth softball?
We're talking about the use of our things the town owns, our athletic fields.
Now, could we make those separate conversations, or should it be the same conversation?
What do you mean?
When we're talking youth sports, I mean, there's massive benefits to that, and I know that other towns around Vermont, including some of these that are listed here, have different standards for their youth sports than compared to their adult leagues.
Okay. Go ahead and suggest what you want to suggest.
Well, one thing that I did was I didn't call all of these different towns that were listed, but I did talk to the director of Parks and Recreation in Brattleboro, and they actually only have one youth softball team, so to compare these numbers, it's not really fair or accurate. But what they do is they charge $25 a head. They don't have a league standard. So if it is a youth league and there's 12 players, they charge them $25 a head. But since they don't have a youth league, they actually have a $5 a head fee to use their field, and it's a traveling team, so they only stop and use it every once in a while. So it's a little different with that youth league, but with their adult leagues, $25 a head, and then out-of-town people, they charge $45 a head. So it's not exactly the way that these numbers line up, but they are trying to accommodate for youth sports and the various benefits that it can bring a town, as well as trying to accommodate for other programs. So I don't know if that's something that we could look at to try and promote the youth women's softball, but I just thought I would bring it up.
Okay.
Question.
Jim?
John, do you know if it's $25 a head per game or per season?
No, per season. So again, that $25 a head was for, they have a lot more teams. I mean, right now, we don't have our men's league even running, but they have, or adult women's league, but they have about 28 men's teams that are signed up with around 12 to 15 players a team. What they charge is $25 a head, and they require the team to carry their own insurance. So they aren't being paid extra insurance, but they require that each team and that organization carry insurance from ASA. And again, that's just Brattleboro. I didn't make the calls to Manchester or South Burlington, but I thought that they were close in proximity and close to Bennington in terms of the type of, I guess, recreation that we're looking for as well.
That 25 bucks a head would actually increase the fees per team.
For the adult leagues.
Yeah.
So that would be, I think I was looking at, yeah, for the adult leagues, it would be more expensive, and we would be bringing in more, but it wouldn't be, we wouldn't be charging them the insurance fee, which is what they had issue with before.
Question, did you folks that are here to talk about the fee schedule, are you aware of these figures from other towns?
No.
Okay, well, do you mind, Joe, if I...
Go ahead.
All right. And Manchester, according to Larry McLeod, what's Larry's title? Sorry.
He's our facilities manager.
There. In Manchester, currently at Applejack Field, it's $600 per game, and that's with lights for 3 hours of use. Then $400 per game, no lights, 3-hour use. And in Brattleboro, softball fields, no lights, $150 for 5-hour use. Softball fields with lights, $100 per field for 5-hour use. Why that's cheaper, I don't know. Then leagues at $35 per resident and $55 per non-resident. I think that pretty much covers it closely, but currently you guys are getting a pretty good deal.
I guess you're comparing the adult leagues and the youth leagues together.
No. These are adult league fees.
We're here for youth.
Okay.
And I'm sorry, just to make one more point that I think is important.
For the ladies last week.
Yeah.
These are separate.
I thought you were here last week for adult women.
Okay, wait. All right.
Just so I can clear.
Hang on, a second. First, let's let them talk. You were going to come back with insurance fees. What are the insurance fees?
I got it down to about around, depending on how many teams, I got it down to $152 per team through ASA
For the season?
for the season, per team.
Yep.
And then it's another.
That's a $1 million or $2 million coverage? What's the policy?
It's a $2 million coverage and a $500 aggregate coverage.
Okay.
And then it's another, which isn't a big cost, it's another $17 registered through ASA as well, which is something you have to do. And insurance, you also got to have certified umpires, just can't have anybody doing it. Which that's a fee as well, because then I'm going to have to get sanctioned umpires. And usually the leagues are responsible for, getting guys to get sanctioned and take the test, which is another $25 a person that whoever I get to do that. And then I got to pay umpires per
Game.
And I wasn't here complaining about the fees of the fields.
Right.
I was just wondering what I'm going to get for my fee, because I know that field's not really well maintained.
Right.
And in the past, when I was vice president of the softball league, I did 99% of the work on it. That's include mowing it and raking the infield and everything.
Okay, we're gonna tell you what you're gonna get for the fees here in a minute, okay?
No, that's fine. I was just.
What do we find on the young ladies? Is the insurance the same?
And our insurance is the same, about $800 a year.
For all the teams you have
Or
playing?
we have 120 girls. Right around that, it's about $800 a year.
Okay. Stuart, what are they gonna get? You want me to read it, or you gonna tell me?
Well, I mean, basically...
Larry, I don't care.
Yeah, we basically mow the fields. If we're contacted early enough before a game, we will actually rake the field, the infields, smooth them out. The leagues themselves are responsible for striping the fields, for the bases, for those kinds of things that make the game. We just do the general maintenance.
Okay, so the grass will be cut, field will be raked if the weather permits.
Yep.
And what about things like the backstops repaired if they need that, or
Yeah, I would think we would take care of anything that's permanent and in
Any
place.
physical thing, dugouts or whatever that.
And we do allow people to place storage buildings, as long as we can tell them where to be placed, to store their equipment. That has been an issue in the past with some who were utilizing space that was basically the town space for storage of their equipment, and some have moved into their own private facilities on our property.
Okay. So,
Joe, if I could also,
go ahead, Larry.
the policy now is clear that special requests can be made to the rec center, Tracy, for specific things they may need on the field. We currently have that arrangement with Southern Vermont College. We have a good working relationship with them now. If they need the field dragged, they just let Mark Sawyer know. And we now have it set up with them to do it twice a week on certain days. They're very happy with that. It's working out very well. We also roll the fields at a cost to the town. We have to rent the rollers to do that. It's 2 highway people for many days. It's about in the $1,500 range. We do that every year for all of our fields. So there is that cost too.
Okay.
So if a schedule is presented, then there should be no problem having the fields raked and maintained for that game, or all games on that schedule?
We won't do can't rake bases and the whole plate, but we'll drag it.
Yep.
But it's got to be a communication with everybody.
Okay.
Just to touch base, the lights, there's like 6 or 7 of them that are out up there, and they're not fixable, other than changing the whole thing. We've changed the light bulbs numerous times, and they just don't work. We'll look at it. And we put in new light bulbs many times up there, prior years, and they're just, the same ones don't work, and they're brand new light bulbs. And Tracy's contacted us a few times through the fire department, and we brought the ladder truck up there so she could change lights for the Mount Anthony Girls Softball tournament that they have up there once a year, and the lights still don't work. So, I mean, there's actually something in the back that's busted, broke, don't work. Just, you know, no lights, nobody's gonna get hurt, especially when you're playing in the dark, you know.
Okay, I think well, at least my position last time is the insurance is non-negotiable. The only room we have is, do we want to lower the actual usage fee for these teams, or do we want to go along with the staff's recommendation to keep it the same? Justin?
Can I ask these two ladies, I'm sorry, I don't remember your name from last time, I apologize.
Daniel.
You were saying last time that how many fields do you use in a season?
3.
We use a total of 5 in town 3.
Okay, so you use your fields at the rec center, Willow Park?
This year we're using middle school and rec center.
Okay, and why do you use 3 fields? Is the games all going on at once? Is that opposed to using one specific one? Help me understand
We
that
have
part.
6 teams, and we try to limit it to playing, 9. We try to limit it to only a couple days a week,
Okay.
so that there's also practice time, or if someone else wanted to use the fields, we're not monopolizing these fields. So we try to limit games to Mondays and Wednesdays, and that's 3 games each day.
So are they all going on at the same time as the 3 different fields?
Yes.
Okay. I mean, I'm just the reason I asked that is to better understand it is, we have one league that has 9 teams, is that what you just told me?
Yes.
That uses 3 different fields to try and cut down on the amount of time they're using our fields. Is that correct so far? A little bit? Am I on the right track?
Yes.
And because of that, we're charging them $250 3 times because they're on 3 different fields at once?
Yes.
And really, I mean, you could...
And we're being charged for... Technically, we could use one field 5 days a week.
And only be charged $250. So you follow my logic where there's a little bit of a breakdown on how this fee is assessed? Because they could, in theory, use one field all day or 5 days a week, or break it up however they chose, and be charged $250. Whereas just breaking it up over the nature of a couple different fields and incurs them another $500 fee. And I don't know if that's a good... If that's a good alignment for the policy and the money, because I'm just wondering if we're kind of, kicking ourselves a little bit by spreading them out and charging them more money, as opposed to just let them use one field and, not incurring the charge 3 times.
My
Just a
suggestion
thought.
was going to be, just because they're working on a budget and they weren't planning on any budget increases this year, any fee increases, would be to give them a break this year.
So this year, we had to make a decision, like, before April, because when we went to pay for the field, that's when we were told that they were up. We weren't given like a heads up, like, we've rented these fields every year for years. And we weren't given a heads up that the fee went up. So we didn't have time to kind of budget where this was going to fall. So we only have one rec center field for the year. We kind of worked out a deal with the middle school, and we're up there. Ideally, Willow Park is the best place for us because there's 2 fields close. There's bathrooms for the girls to use. That's ideal for us. We're using the rec center field this year. There used to be 2 rec center fields. One of them's gone, so there's just one now there. That's the only field we're utilizing. Next year, we need to know, are these fees set?
Right.
Because if it is, then we're going to have to increase fees by about $15.
About $10, $15.
And as treasurer, I already have checks that are, unfortunately, $35 I'm getting back. And increasing the fee to $50 per kid now. I don't want to see kids not sign up.
No, and that's why I'm asking. I'm just wondering if one league who utilizes a couple different fields should be charged $250 times 3 to use fields when you could in theory just use one and only incur a $250 charge.
But you're the one who asked for more fields. I mean, we're not telling you, you're going after the number of fields you feel you need to run your league. Correct.
We're not asking for additional fields.
No, but
They're cutting back on
if we said you could have one league for $250, would you take one field for that all season, or you need 3 fields?
Well, the problem is, it's not just games, you have practice times there as well. So you have 9 teams vying for practice times on one field. It's not going to work.
I've got a question for Stu. Stu, do you have a ballpark figure or exact figure on the amount of revenue that's generated for all the teams that play?
No.
Actually, that question as well.
Should not be revenue.
I know Brattleboro, when I was talking to them, again, it's not Bennington, but they said that they collect $20,000 to $25,000 a year off of their method. Brattleboro collects $20,000 to $25,000 a year through the different programs that they have. So if we can get the different leagues to be using these fields, that's some money that we could use towards something else.
I don't understand, again, I'm late to the game here. Why are we charging by field rather than by a league or per head?
Yeah.
Why? I mean, wouldn't it be,
Kind of what I'm looking at.
Right.
this per field with the scheduling and everything else? I just think we're wasting a lot of time for everybody, including the administration. Why can't we come up with a cost for, if you have a league per team, here's how much you pay?
Isn't that what you proposed before, Chief? What are your leagues, what are your teams playing in the league? No, behind you.
His issue was just with the insurance before.
Yeah, his issue was
Right.
just with the insurance.
Right, the first time, I was just looking to sign a waiver where the guys we wouldn't have to pay for insurance. But I went out and got prices for that.
Yeah.
And, I mean, I'm trying to keep it as low as I can because there's other leagues around that are gonna be around or lower than I am. And like we all talked about, Stu said, there used to be 30, 40 teams here in Bennington playing men's softball. And when I first started, there was 4 divisions, and now there's none. I'm just trying to get it back here, because Arlington's not having a league, and White Creek still is, but it's somebody else new running it, where I've done it before, so I'm hoping I can draw some people in that know that I can do it.
Let me ask the board this, because it's kind of come up. My feeling is, this is not a moneymaker for the town. This is covered expenses it takes us to maintain it, period.
Hopefully.
It'd be great if you had a little excess, but this is not where you do it, because it's providing, we're responsible for providing recreation facilities, but there's got to be a cost to it. Now, whether it's by field or by the league, I hear what you're saying. I'm just wondering, how could you bank on a league if we have none of leagues, if they all go to White Creek?
If there's no leagues, there's
So we
no
don't cut
charge.
the grass, we don't cut the grass at Willow Park.
We still are going to cut it, though, because we have to allow other people like myself going out to play catch. So we're going to be cutting the fields regardless.
Well,
We still have to maintain them and put that cost in. So if we can recoup the money by having 30 teams here, or just having people travel here from surrounding areas, I think that's extremely beneficial.
I don't think it's up to these individuals to subsidize the town. And the fields are ours, and we've got to maintain them, even if they have no leagues. So I just think they should come up with a number per team.
I also plan on trying to host a tournament, at least one a month. I do a cancer tournament every September, even when it wasn't softball league here in town, and I get somewhere between 10 and 12 teams just for that. And all that money is all donated to someone locally who has cancer or survived cancer. Fortunately, sometimes they don't make it to see that tournament, but I give it to their family, take care of expenses like last year. But I always get good turnouts for that tournament, so hoping if I do one a month.
I guess I'm looking at it too, I think, like how Tom is, and I just don't think the payment structure is set up appropriately. And I'm not looking to create a bunch of revenue off of it either. I'm just trying to think of a way that makes a little bit more sense in how we're doing it. And does Larry or Stuart, do you know roughly how many hours our fields are being used by these outside organizations? Is there a way to get a number on that? Because what I'm thinking is, I mean, is there an hourly fee we could put in there? And I mean, if it's a lot of hours, you could have an hourly fee as little as $1 or $2 an hour.
Well, that's exactly what Manchester's doing, that's what Brattleboro's doing.
Right, and you know, that almost...
Charge you by the hour.
And I don't say that so you guys end up paying more money. That's not what I'm looking for. I'm just saying, is there a little bit better way of structuring this? So if you have 3 hours allocated, and I don't know what the number would be, but even if it was a couple bucks or something like that, where it gets us to at the end of the season, well, you know, we've collected $10,000 to $12,000 and it covers some of the maintenance. Is that a better way to accurately judge how much people are using the system and have them pay appropriately? Than just saying, well, you have a field that you can use whenever, $250, and, you know, maybe you're paying a little bit more than you should be, or you're not, or another group is paying, you know, it just seems like maybe a different payment model might work a little bit better for this.
Well, I mean, I thought this was going to be easy. What I thought we were going to do is we were going to say the insurance is not negotiable. And yes, well, because of the economic times, this year everybody's struggling, we're going to drop $25 per field or $50 per field or whatever. And if you recall the conversation we had 2 weeks ago, we said it was just going to be a temporary thing, then we'd go back when the economy came up to the typical fee structure. So I don't think we're at that point. Do we want to get to that point? Do you all agree that the insurance is non-negotiable? The teams must have those insurance?
Even if they don't, even if they get their own insurance, we can't do that?
They're going to get their own insurance.
They're going to get their own.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
We don't do
So
that.
they're not, yeah, but at first, right, but at first it was,
It's still an entry fee, but
correct me if I'm wrong though, but at first the rate that we were charging was for our insurance, right? Additional money towards our insurance? And since
No, never been.
Okay.
Never been. Okay, so let me ask you this then. In order to be able to market Bennington as a softball place to play your softball, what do you feel that you'd have to see the fee reduced to in order to be able to recruit these teams here?
well, just anything to try to cut down on the entry fee. Like, I'm looking at $600 right now for a team to play 18-game season with a double elimination into the season playoff scenario.
Say it again, you're looking for how much? Or how much you're looking at 800?
600.
600.
And how many teams?
Right now, I have 6 definites, but I haven't put it in the banner just by hearsay.
Okay.
You know, because I'm not sure where I'm going to leave it at right now, so.
Let me ask the young ladies, how much have you already collected treasure for each child?
We charge $35 per child.
And how many?
With a family cap, right?
And we only cap, at a family cap of $75.
And you have how many, Holly?
120.
120.
So what do you feel would be reasonable?
Well, John, did I hear you right? You said, is it Brattleboro charges $5?
Yeah, it's a little different circumstance because they have just the one team and it's a traveling team. So in terms of playing on their fields, they do have access to both their fields. But in terms of playing games, they only play a couple of them, 2 or 3 a year, but they still practice, and it's $5 a head per kid. Now, when I looked at the numbers that we're trying to charge you, it's around maybe $7 a head per kid, so it's not a huge cut, and it's still more than what we were charging last year, but it might be something that I'm only going to speak for myself, but something that we might be able to negotiate with. The tournament fees, those are extra. When they do host tournaments, there are extra fees.
We don't host a tournament, it's actually just a tournament. Just a playoff weekend.
Yeah, no, that's not extra. No.
So I guess in what we're saying, when we went $200 for 3 fields, we're now paying $1,050,
Right.
right? And even at $5 a head, at 120 kids, that's still only 600? Did I do my math?
Yeah.
Right? So why did we get, even if we did it that way?
Well, no, that was never presented before. That was the information that I
I'm
collected.
saying, you know, if we went by that.
Right.
But I understand you're doing the adult league, and you're comparing that thing. Is there any other established town leagues for softball?
I can make some other calls. There are established leagues. That was just the one that I was able to get in touch with and get some good information out of, so.
Hey, that's fine, but we've got to make a decision on this.
I mean,
This has got to be done tonight,
I tend
folks.
to think, $60 a head if you have a 10-guy team for an adult league is a pretty reasonable field charge, to be in a league for 18 games or whatever, I appreciate wanting to get it started up and whatnot. I'm really much more tuned into the youth cause. I think the fields are there so kids can play ball.
Exactly.
I think that's why we have town
We're trying to
parks.
keep it cost effective.
Yeah, I mean, I am involved in adult sports, and I expect to pay for them, when I go out and stuff. And people get sponsorships and things like that. There's other things you can do. I sponsor a Little League team, and we do, there's things like that happen. I think the value of team sports to kids in this community is immeasurable. And I think that's a service that this town could well provide. If there's something we can do to cap their field price, so, there's a maximum for the league, instead of every time they use a field, adding yet another line item for the field, something like that to bring it on a little under control, make it a little more predictable.
And we use the fields for 10 weeks.
Right, and so it's a fairly short season.
It starts beginning of April and ends the first, second week of June.
Yeah, I mean, the maintenance does cost money, there's mowers, there's gas, there's labor, all that stuff, and we do have to do that. But I think the town needs to be willing to provide some of that.
I'll ask ladies one more time, because I'm still not getting the answer I'm asking for. You said you've collected $35 per child.
Yes.
You told us last week X dollars goes to uniforms.
Well, for $35, the kids get a shirt, shorts, and socks. But that also covers our insurance,
Okay.
equipment, we have to pay our umpires.
And what did you figure you were going to pay for the fees when you told the parents they're going to pay $35 per child?
What we were going to pay for fields?
Yes.
The normal, what we usually paid was anywhere between $200 to $300 is what.
Per field, per season?
For the 3 fields, plus 3 fields.
All 3 fields?
And that included tournaments. That's what we're going to charge for.
I move that we charge $35 per youth participant for the use of the, basically, not $35, but the percentage of that $35. How much of that was of the 35 was for the field? What percentage?
We paid $300, and that included all of the fields.
Okay,
For practice games and for tournaments.
but isn't a portion of that,
And you paid
Yes.
what already this year?
We paid $250 for the one
$250
field.
for the one field?
Is any portion of that $35 devoted to field fees?
Yes.
Yeah, how much?
What portion is?
We try to save every year, we try to run it basically almost 0 to 0 every year. When none of us get paid, it's not for profit.
What portion of that?
Of that $35 is?
Broke it down like that, John?
We don't know. Yeah.
That's really what I was
You have to hit that no matter what.
Yeah.
no matter how many-
Here we go with a motion.
All right, I just want to leave the adult the way it was, but just make a motion that if they are willing to pay another $50, they get their 3 fields, like they had last year. They paid it last year
So $300 for the use of the 3
for
fields.
the use of the 3 fields, like they did last year.
I'm fine with that in this specific instance, but I think we're just band-aiding this problem here because we're coming and we're trying to change the stipulations for one group when we're looking at as to whether or not this policy that we have in place is currently effective.
Right.
I would say I'm fine with that for this year.
Well, I
But
think
I would like, I guess, I would, Sharon, if you could also ask within that, the collection of some usable data throughout the rest of this summer about how many people are using the field, how much time they're logging onto it, and then we can look into this time next year, or before that, what the fees will be set for next year.
And that the sponsors of these teams meet with us after the season to help us with that data, to see whether we paid their part, they're there. And so you'll know before your season next year how much you have to go to parents.
Yeah, because we usually
See
start
what you got,
in
okay?
January. We usually start in January, good meetings. But we start our budget process.
Absolutely. Does the rec center have a schedule or what all the fields are being used and when they're being used?
Absolutely.
So we should be able to derive some information from those schedules also.
But, you know, we got to know that we've got to look at what it costs, Larry. We got to gather the data. What does it cost to maintain those fields to the standards? Because that's got to be figured in when we talk about after the seasons are over, okay? And we'll have to come up with a policy that's fair, and yes, give the youth the things and the adults.
Yeah, I
you know.
think maybe if we could, and I hate to ask you to do this, but to break down, so we have a youth fee and an adult fee, because
Well, you'll be facing the youth, the soccer youth.
I was just going to say this. How about that one too?
Talk about any field use with softball. We have a cross on soccer coming up, and the amount of youth soccer in town that uses the field, that's going to be another.
and I'm talking about, like middle school and below.
It's hard to pinpoint a maintenance cost on it. I put in a budget number that approximately what we spend a year on all of the fields combined, and that fluctuates. And I'm sure folks wish we would spend 3 times that, but it's not there. It's about $25,000 a year for everything, including utilities, mowing, everything. That's not a lot of money.
Just to give you an idea, I also coach Baby Ruth baseball, which is 13 to 15-year-olds. We charge $65 a kid to play there, and all they get is a hat and a t-shirt. They have to get their own pants and socks. And so that just tells you where, we go to Greg for our signs, our sponsors pay a fee to be a sponsor, and we get a sign that goes hanging on the fence for the year with the team, the sponsor's name on it. But, and we run on pennies. We don't, that costs, for uniforms and umpires and equipment and all that stuff is just, we run on pennies year to year. It's just about enough to get through the season.
I've got a question, Joe, for the board in general, and that is whether or not we should delay our decision till we get more information from Larry.
They're ready to start seasons, they're ready to go.
They're already budgeted.
With the board's concurrence, what I'm saying is this is a one-time motion here. We're going to relook the policy after the season when we get accurate data to see where it is, and then we'll go there.
Go back to what was in place last year.
Right, all right, so you're going to break this year with this motion she's going to give you.
Should that be across the board, so we're not facing this? Okay.
but if you pay,
Well, the issue we run into is now, there's other leagues besides us, so everything is booked. So we only have one field, and that's all we're going to get for our $250. That's,
Well, I think the motion is to go back to ask you to pay what you paid last year instead of...
she's saying that the fields aren't available now.
Well, we can't reinvent the wheel here, it's
well,
not...
and that's fine. We know that this year is pretty much.
Right, it's not perfect.
This year's,
Yeah.
I guess we're looking for the future, right?
Yeah, and that's, I think, why we're looking for information, so we can try and make this thing work a little more smoothly in the future. I think we're committed to that here.
Okay, let's go with the motion.
That need a second.
Okay. Everybody understand it?
Not really.
We're not really there.
It's not really making
leave
a
it.
difference, because...
It sounds like they're not going to pay the
They're not
$50 for
gonna-
the extra fields.
Well, they're not going to get the
They're not
extra...
going to get the extra.
They're not going to get the
They don't
extra
have
field. It's all withdraw my motion.
Well, I think this was,
No action required.
to go back to what we charged last year across the board for everybody, I thought was what your motion was, so we can take a look at this going forward with some real data that we can, actually formulate a better
No,
policy.
I think it was just the girls, but did we have fees for the softball leagues and all the...
Selected from Southern Vermont College has already paid, as well as this group, and there's another group that's already paid as well.
I'm sure refund. Yeah. I'll make a motion that we go back to last year's policy numbers, with the caveat that we're gonna have some usable data to go forward with next year. I think this is about the 4th time somebody's made a motion here, but...
Any limit on the...
Somebody's got to withdraw.
Wait,
I think to go back to what we
time
had,
out.
that's it.
Did you withdraw your motion?
I did.
Okay, the motion's withdrawn, we're ready for a new motion.
We're gonna go back to last year's policy is in place with last year's fees, with the understanding that next year may be different based upon the data we get going forward, and we do need the information for next year.
Okay, second, the motion is
But does
second.
that mean we're going to refund what
I
we
think that's
collected?
what it would mean, yes.
Okay.
I'll second that.
We got a motion in 2 seconds. Any other discussion?
Is this policy's already in place, been adopted by the,
This one, no.
This is a new policy.
this is a new policy? Okay, okay.
This is good. Okay, all in favor?
Yeah.
Okay.
All opposed? Tom, where were you on this?
I'm favor of it, I'm sorry.
So it's 7-4.
Whatever.
Stuart, we'll go back, we'll have Larry, you have to refund, what do you say, Vermont College or whatever? The other ones? And, we need you folks' cooperation when we sit down with this thing, come up with a policy, because we can't be going through this every year. And you understand we got a cost. I think you sense, at least this board, the youth does have a special condition because we want to support the youth. And yes, us adults can pay a little more to do it, but it can't be all of them. It's got to be, we got to be able to make sure we have the facilities for our entire population, our entire demographic, so. And
Well, I think maybe a meeting with
whether
the
3
representative.
fields is practical for you, maybe, I don't know. Maybe I'll look and see whether you can do it in 2 fields, longer periods of time, but 2 fields. Those are the kind of questions I think we're going to ask when we look this again. We're limited to how many fields. How many fields do we have? We got 3 active fields?
3.
The timing is there's other facilities like Sacred Heart School, they use those fields too. Those are where their home games are hosted. So we
Right.
always, when they're all done, we take the fields right after that. But I know like Sacred Heart uses the rec center as their home games for softball because they don't have a facility. And so we try to work with the other teams to make sure that we're after them.
Okay. All right, so we're back to there last year.
Maybe
It's
you
not
can
going to fix
get
your
another
fields.
couple fields or part used of the field or something. If you ask Tracy.
You brought up the Veterans Home the other day when you were here, and we don't have a softball field
Yeah, I
or
know.
baseball field. But, so people do know, we do have a land use policy over there. And we do let the high school and the grade schools, they do play their soccer over there and things like that, practice their soccer over there. Those fields are available for that. And just so everybody knows, we can't charge a fee for those fields. We just ask for a donation to the Veterans Fund. That's a needy Veterans Fund that, believe it or not, a lot of veterans don't have any families here, and things like Medicare don't pay for hearing aids, they don't pay for shoes, and those money's got to be provided by private donations, so I'll make that
We do
announcement.
utilize fields in Shasta and Arlington.
Yeah.
We're just not charged
Okay.
anything for those.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on to the next one, which is the proclamation. And Sharon, you want to read that?
I knew you were going to ask me to read that. The Town of Bennington Proclamation National Library Week 2013, April 14th through the 20th, 2013. Whereas libraries are the heart of communities, campuses, and schools, and whereas librarians work to meet the changing needs of communities, including providing resources for everyone and bringing services outside of library walls. And whereas libraries and librarians bring together community members to enrich and shape the community and address local issues. And whereas librarians are trained, tech-savvy professionals providing technical training and access to downloadable content like ebooks. And whereas libraries offer programs to meet community needs, providing residents with resume writing tools, 24/7 homework help, and financial planning resources for all ages. And whereas libraries continuously grow and evolve to meet the needs of the community members, and whereas libraries, librarians, library workers, and supporters across America are celebrating National Library Week. Now therefore, to be it resolved that we, the Bennington Select Board, do hereby proclaim National Library Week, April 14th through the 20th, 2013. We encourage all residents to visit the library this week to take advantage of the wonderful library resources. Dated at Bennington this 8th day of April 2013.
Okay, do I have a motion to accept the proclamation?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? That's unanimous. And Stuart, you pass it around for signature? Okay, we have some liquor and tobacco licenses.
Yes, I'm going to circulate one that has 3 additions to what you had in your packet. Bennington Pizza House, J.C.'s Tavern, and Your Belly's Deli's has been added, and we add these right up until the meeting time practically, so I'm going to circulate that for your signature.
Okay. And manager's report.
Fairly lengthy manager's report. The first item on, that we need some action on is a new credit card policy, which we attached been developed by my finance director in concert with the bank that we do most of our banking with. We've had this request from department heads, especially for travel, and then for some general one-time purchases where an online purchase could be made that would really be beneficial to the town from a point of view of cost. In the past, people have been using their own credit cards in those situations and then seeking reimbursement, and depending on the cycle of the warrants, they may end up waiting up to 4 weeks for reimbursement, and in some cases that does create problems for our employees. This policy would then put in place credit cards for specific departments, and they're listed in here. They would be held and controlled through the finance director's and the manager's office and used for the purpose intended after approval is granted. So it's not like we're going to be handing out a credit card and somebody's going to go running all over town with it. But I think it's time we did this, and it would require an action by this board, a motion to accept the policy as proposed, and we could then put it in place.
I've got a question for you, Stu. So I've read this fairly carefully, and so I just want to be reassured that any purchase has to be pre-approved.
That's correct. Now, there may be during a travel time where a card is used to book your room, where there will be subsequent meals and things that are put on the card, but we would then look for documentation after the fact in those particular cases, but otherwise, everything has to be pre-approved.
I move we accept the policy.
Second.
Okay, a motion and a second. Any discussion on it?
I was surprised we didn't have one already.
Yeah, I was going to say, this is pretty common practice, any business, anything.
Yeah, we haven't.
You can't book anything without a credit card anymore.
Yeah.
Cash doesn't work.
Right.
Okay, have any other discussion?
Nope.
All in favor? That's unanimous.
Thank you. The second action item, you got a memorandum in your packet from Mike Harrington seeking to reduce the interest rate that we charge on our housing loan program. I can't tell you how long ago that interest rate was set, but in fact it's higher than the rate that we charge for our commercial loan program. So Mike is suggesting that we reduce the housing loan interest from 6% and 4%, depending on whether you're a homeowner or a landlord, to a fixed rate of 50% of prime interest rate at the time of closing plus 2 points, but not to exceed 7%. And since this is a policy, a program adopted by the board, you would need to approve that via motion.
Question for
Go ahead.
Vice Chair. Sharon, what, as our banker lady,
Oh,
What's
okay.
the,
I'll put on that hat.
what's the current interest rate for a home loan through either nationally or through your bank?
For a residential mortgage,
What's prime, basically?
3.5.
something.
Okay. So even at 4%?
I mean, prime is 3.25 for
Right.
commercial, we're charging,
So even at 4%, what we would be, what did you, 3.2, we would be 0.75 higher?
Plus 2?
well,
Plus 2
we'd be at-
points.
yeah, we'd be at 3.64.
Yeah. I'd move it.
Tom?
I'd make a motion that we approve.
Okay.
Just one question. This is similar to our business loans. This requires a denial by a traditional
Yes.
lending firm. Okay.
Yes.
I have a motion. Do I have a second? I have a second. Motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor? And that's unanimous.
The last is just the annual financial plan. We just circulate that for signatures. It doesn't require action, so I'll do that. And I do have a few issues to talk about beyond that, very briefly. As you may know, the folks over in the Bowen Road, Park Street area have been visited by representatives of the Environmental Protection Agency and the Agency of Natural Resources, reacting to a discovery last year and confirmation, I think it was 2 years ago, confirmation last year, that there is a plume of PCB-contaminated sediment that is moving out from beneath the former Jard site that EPA had come in and actually capped. Apparently, the rocky soil, the river bottom-like soil that exists beneath that entire neighborhood allows those sediments to move at times of high water, heavy rains. And so the EPA and the state are in participating in discovering the breadth of the plume itself, and where it has impacted homes, they're actually taking actions to clean them up, seal the basements so that they won't be impacted in the future by that plume. And ultimately, it's going to be probably a determination of whether or not this particular site, the Jard site, is now on the national priority list, which would make it a Superfund site, which would mean that because it's an abandoned site and the owners are unknown or cannot be located, the Environmental Protection Agency would move in and set up to essentially try to clean that groundwater plume and treat it in some fashion. We won't know what that solution will be. We won't even know within the next several months whether or not it will be nominated for the NPL, but that is the purpose of their visit in town, and they are working with the residents, those that will work with them, to study this plume in that neighborhood. Arising out of that, a resident indicated to EPA that at some point in the past, PCBs from Jard were dumped on our Lower Willow landfill. The softball field and the playing fields there are built over a landfill that was closed in 1968. The fact of the matter is, it's untrue. Jard did not exist in 1968, did not make its first shipment until sometime in 1970, but nonetheless, EPA reacted to the tip, gained our permission to study the site, do some test borings, water, and the preliminary findings have come back. The surface water running in the drainage course, also discolored with iron, is uncontaminated. The groundwaters are essentially uncontaminated, but there are PCBs, older PCBs, because those have been around since the 50s, in portions of the slope of the landfill, the old landfill. They have been determined. There are other things that you might expect to find in a landfill. Some of them are carcinogenic, and we now have that data. We understand that. We have notified Grace Christian School of that problem. They were cutting through the slope of the landfill there to get up to the playing fields. We have blocked off that pathway. They're not using it now because they understand that there is somewhat of a risk. But I tell you this because we are waiting for a notice letter from EPA, which will ask us to provide them with a proposal, if we wish to do so, on how we might mitigate the risk associated with that drainway and the associated materials in the former landfill. We don't know what the notice letter will say. We expect it within a week. We have had consultants look at the data. They have assured us that this is relatively minor when it comes to pollution from a landfill, but we will have to deal with the fact that EPA is the lead person in this, and whatever proposal ultimately comes forward, it'll either be the town and potentially the state of Vermont that is involved, because the state owns the lands of the highway. And when they built the highway, they actually moved the material from the old landfill back onto the top of the landfill and covered it. But we don't know. We're hoping that we can just mitigate it by blocking access to the site so that people don't get on that slope. It's really heavily vegetated. You wouldn't want to try to walk through there unless you had a machete or a chainsaw with you anyway, but nonetheless, we're going to have to react to it, and we'll keep you posted as that becomes clearer. Two notes were handed to me during the meeting. Joe, the 40th Army Band, is that the one you're talking about? They're already committed for the Battle Day Parade?
They are?
Yes.
Good. Save me a letter. We got them a favor out there.
Yeah, I don't have to write that letter, right?
Want to take back some of that money?
And Paul stopped down because he heard through others that the zombie targets are actually set up for the New Experiences Camp. They're actually targets that the youth will use. So they truly are zombie targets.
That is a fine response right there. That is
There you go.
lightning quick.
Yeah. I think the last thing I have, and this we can talk about at another time, but I did check with council at Jim's request and Rob's opinion on whether or not the town can adopt a livable wage. I'll read it. The town has only those powers delegated to it by the state legislature, and those powers do not include the authority to set minimum wage rates in town. So we'll have to talk about that at a future point.
We're not a home rule state. Okay, anything else there?
I think that's it.
Okay, other business, Tom?
No.
Greg?
Oh, sorry, I do have one. Just to remind the folks that they've got to fill out their homestead applications by the 15th, otherwise they're going to be subject to a penalty. I'm really following on Joni Pacino's comments at the town meeting. It's really important that they file their, I'll go down the line, I'll remember the number. I'm sorry, it's the HS 122. It's very important that that get filed. Otherwise, they get penalized.
Okay, Greg?
One thing, yesterday we hosted the second Bennington Cultural Summit, identifying economic development goals for the creative economy in Bennington. It's a nice article in the Rutland Herald today, if you missed it, and you can keep your eyes out for the third one, where we've identified a lot of, or I would say 7 goals for an economic plan. So I want to thank the people that came. We had a good crowd on a nice day up at the country club, and a lot of good work. So.
Okay. John? Nope. Justin?
Are we at a point where we need to start scheduling meetings for these boards and commissions?
Which boards and commissions?
Appointments?
Yeah, appointments.
That just was in the paper today.
I don't know. Have we got any interest in?
Just wanted to, okay.
It was just in today's
Yeah.
paper, yeah.
Yeah, actually, I think I also ran Saturday, but we've just published it now because the new board is sitting, and you folks can talk about the interview process and those things as those things start to roll in.
April 15th is the deadline, I believe, to apply.
I believe that's
What else,
correct.
Justin?
Position.
That was it, that's all I have.
Jim? No, sir. Sharon?
Do you want me to go through these?
Yeah, why don't we do it, just so people out there see it.
Okay.
Here.
Just boards and commissions, applications are due by noon on Monday, April 15th at the town office. The Development Review Board, which is a 3-year term, has 2 open positions. And that is the alternate in addition to the 2 open positions, too?
Yes.
And then there's 2 alternate positions that are also open. Historic Preservation Commission is a 3-year appointment, and there is 1 position open for that. Housing Authority is a 5-year appointment, and there's 1 position open for that. Board of Listers is a 2-year term, and we have 1 position open. Planning Commission is a 4-year term. There are 2 positions open for that commission. Regional Commission is a 2-year term with 1 position. And the Town Service Officer is a 1-year term, and there's 1 open position for
Okay,
that.
thank you. You have anything else?
No, just the highway crews are out working
Yep.
again already, and just be careful, feed their,
Just 2 things
Fuel
occurred
signs.
today I just want to bring up. Stu, please, to Paul and the fire chiefs, we have a budget process. We ought to foresee this kind of thing. If we ought to make a decision whether we want to continue to host the statewide. It does cost more money. If so, then we need to figure that out in the budget process. And to the old board members and to the new board members, remember, we went through the recreation budget, and tonight we went through it again. So I would ask you to think hard when Stuart gives us that budget next December for us to look at January, the kind of things we went through today. And if we're going to take and work hard in January to approve a budget or get a budget in front of the voters and change it midway through. I think we better look at what we're doing. I think we did it for right reasons this time, but let's get everybody involved, and let's, a lot of work goes in. We did look at the recreation budget, and this is part of it, so enough of that. We do have need to go in executive sessions for contract. The issue is labor relations.
I move.
I have a motion, do I have a second?
Second.
Discussion, all in favor? And that's unanimous. Did you take that yesterday at the